A list from antiquity still defines human ambition today. We are about to journey through the 7 wonders of the ancient world. These were not simple landmarks, but colossal declarations carved in stone and bronze, each a story of power, devotion, and genius. By the end, you will understand not just what was built, but why these creations still haunt our imagination centuries after most vanished. We will explore a tomb that defied gravity, a garden that may never have existed, and a lighthouse that guided an age of learning. What does it mean to build something meant to last forever? That list you know so well was not an official decree. It was born from the wanderlust of ancient Greek travelers, men who sailed across the wine-dark sea and walked dusty roads to see the marvels of their world. Think of them as the first travel bloggers, their guides written on papyrus scrolls instead of websites. The most famous of these writers was a poet named Antipater of Sidon. Around 2,200 years ago, he composed a poem that essentially said, "I have seen the walls of Babylon, the statue of Zeus, the hanging gardens, and so on." His breathless account was not a dry inventory, but a celebration of human achievement meant to stir the hearts of his fellow Greeks. This was the original bucket list. For a Greek tourist of that era, visiting these sites was the ultimate grand tour, a journey that defined cultural sophistication. It is crucial to understand the lens through which they were chosen. Every single wonder existed within the sphere of Greek knowledge and influence, clustered around the Mediterranean basin and the Near East. There were staggering monuments in the Americas, in Asia, in Africa, far to the south, but they were beyond the horizon of the Greek world. So the list is not a global measure of ancient engineering, but a snapshot of what impressed one particular civilization at the height of its exploration. It reflects their values, monumental scale, artistic beauty, and a touch of divine ambition. They were wonders, yes, but wonders seen through Greek eyes. That Greek tourist's dream list began with a site that remains utterly real. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the sole survivor, the ancient wonder you can still stand before and touch. Its survival is not a gentle persistence, but a defiant roar across 46 centuries. Think about that number for a moment. When this pyramid was completed, woolly mammoths still walked the earth. The stone had been cut and placed over 1,000 years before the Trojan War, and nearly 2,500 years before the birth of Julius Caesar. It is so old that it was already ancient history to Cleopatra, and yet there it stands. Its scale is the first thing that overwhelms you. Originally, it rose to a height of 481 feet, built from an estimated 2.3 million limestone blocks. Each of those blocks weighs on average 2.5 tons, some as much as 15 tons. The base covers 13 acres, a footprint so vast you could fit the cathedrals of Florence, Milan, and St. Peter's in Rome all within its perimeter. But the true shock is not just the mass, it is the mind-bending precision. The 4 sides are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points of the compass, north, south, east, and west, with an error margin of less than 1/15 of a degree. The sides are level to within an inch. This is engineering of a caliber we would struggle to match today without lasers and satellites, achieved with nothing but copper chisels, stone hammers, and a profound understanding of the sun and stars. It was not always the rough, stepped monolith we see now. In its prime, the Great Pyramid was a shimmering, otherworldly spectacle. Its core was encased in smooth, polished Chura limestone, blocks so finely joined that a knife blade could not slip between them. This casing would have reflected the sun with a blinding white glare, visible for miles across the desert. At its very peak, completing the sacred shape, sat a capstone likely sheathed in electrum, a dazzling mix of gold and silver. This was not a tomb hidden away, it was a monument meant to be seen, a staircase for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to the gods. That pharaoh was Khufu, a ruler of the 4th dynasty who desired an eternal home matching his divine status. The pyramid was his gateway to the afterlife, a machine of resurrection built with intricate chambers and narrow shafts pointing to specific stars. But how did his people build it? The absence of cranes, pulleys, or iron tools makes the achievement seem almost supernatural. The most accepted theory involves a massive, spiraling ramp built along the pyramid's side, up which teams of workers hauled the stones on sledges. Other theories suggest an internal ramp, a corkscrew tunnel within the growing structure itself. We know the workforce was not slaves, as old stories claimed, but likely skilled laborers and farmers who worked during the Nile's annual flood when their fields were underwater. They were fed, housed, and organized with a bureaucratic efficiency that rivals any modern project. The enduring mystery lies in the how, not the why. We understand the religious purpose, we can trace the quarries, we can even find the workers' settlements, but the sheer logistical ballet of moving millions of multi-ton blocks with such celestial precision, that is the whisper that still echoes from the desert. It forces a humbling question. What does a society value so deeply that it will dedicate decades, even generations, to its creation? For Khufu's Egypt, the answer was eternity, carved in stone and aimed at the heavens. And while the gleaming casing stones are long gone, looted for other buildings over the millennia, the pyramid's brutal, geometric truth remains, a silent lesson in ambition from the dawn of history. Precision of that magnitude hints at a knowledge we have yet to fully decipher. Beyond the staggering alignment, the Great Pyramid seems to whisper mathematical secrets. The ratio of its perimeter to its height is remarkably close to 2 times pi, that fundamental constant of a circle. This suggests the builders may have understood the concept of a circle's relationship to its radius and intentionally encoded it into a square-based structure. Similarly, the proportions of its faces appear to reflect the golden ratio, a harmonious proportion found throughout nature and art. Now, were these deliberate choices or astonishing coincidences born from a chosen set of measurements? The debate is fierce. Some see it as proof of advanced, lost knowledge. Others argue that if you start with any set of dimensions, you can eventually find mathematical patterns if you look hard enough. Yet the consistency is haunting. Then there are the narrow shafts, no wider than a dinner plate, that snake from the so-called king's and queen's chambers deep within. For decades, these were dismissed as mere ventilation. But in the 1990s, a robotic camera revealed that the shafts from the king's chamber point directly to the celestial pole and to the belt of the constellation Orion, which was linked to the god Osiris. The southern shaft from the Queen's chamber targets the star Sirius, associated with the goddess Isis. This was no ventilation system, it was a cosmic blueprint. The pyramid was a machine designed to funnel the souls of the pharaoh and his queen directly to their eternal places among the stars. This brings us to the heart of the monument, the King's Chamber. It is a stark, austere room built entirely from massive blocks of red granite, a stone quarried over 500 miles away. In the center sits a single, lidless granite sarcophagus, its exterior slightly larger than the doorway leading into the chamber. This means the sarcophagus was placed inside before the chamber's roof was completed, a detail that speaks to meticulous phase-by-phase construction. But here is the first great puzzle of this room. No mummy, no treasure, no inscriptions of any kind were ever found inside. It was utterly empty when modern explorers first entered. Was it robbed in antiquity, or was it never used? The absence of hieroglyphs is particularly strange for an Egyptian tomb. Some theorists propose the chamber was not a tomb at all, but a powerful energy generator or initiation chamber. Mainstream Egyptology holds firm that it was indeed the burial place of Pharaoh Khufu, stripped clean by thieves perhaps only centuries after his burial. The silence of the chamber only deepens the mystery. Why, then, did this wonder alone survive the relentless march of time, war, and earthquake that claimed all the others? The answer lies in its brutal simplicity and immovable mass. The pyramid is essentially a giant pile of stone. It is geometry itself. There are no delicate columns to topple, no wooden supports to burn, no bronze plates to melt down for weapons. It is too massive to dismantle easily, and its core limestone blocks were less desirable for looters than the fine, polished casing stones that were eventually stripped away. It became a literal mountain, too useful as a landmark and too difficult to remove. Its survival is a testament not to gentle preservation, but to sheer, indomitable physical presence. It simply refused to go away, standing as a silent, stony question mark against the sky. A question that leads us from the solid, enduring earth to a wonder that seemed to defy it entirely, a vision of lush greenery suspended impossibly in the dry desert air. But the pyramid's silent, geometric certainty gives way to a wonder made of whispers. If the Great Pyramid is a fact carved in stone, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are a dream painted on the air. They are the only one of the 7 wonders for which we have no confirmed physical trace, a phantom of foliage and flowing water that may never have existed at all. The legend is achingly romantic. It tells of King Nebuchadnezzar II, the mighty ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire in the 6th century before the Common Era. He supposedly built this marvel for his wife, Queen Ambience, who hailed from the green, mountainous lands of Media. In the flat, sun-baked plains of Babylon, she grew heartsick for the forests and rolling hills of her homeland. So the king, in a grand gesture of love, commanded an artificial mountain of gardens to be constructed. Ancient descriptions paint a staggering picture. Imagine a ziggurat, a stepped pyramid, but instead of mud brick, its terraces were vast, elevated stone platforms. Upon these platforms, soil was packed deep enough to grow full-sized trees. Vines, flowers, and fruit trees cascaded over the edges, creating the illusion of a lush, green mountain floating above the city. The true engineering miracle, however, was water. Babylon sat in a dry region, and lifting enough water to the highest terrace, estimated at perhaps 75 feet high, would have been a colossal challenge. The accounts describe a sophisticated irrigation system, possibly a chain pump powered by slaves turning a screw, that drew water from the Euphrates River and sent it flowing down from the top terrace in charming rivulets and waterfalls. This was not just a garden, it was a masterpiece of hydraulic engineering and a monument to longing. Our knowledge of this wonder hangs by the slenderest of threads. The earliest known source is a Babylonian priest named Berossus, writing in the 3rd century before the Common Era, roughly 300 years after Nebuchadnezzar's reign. His original writings are lost, surviving only in fragments quoted by later Greek historians. These later writers, like Diodorus Siculus and Strabo, eagerly repeated and likely embellished the tale, adding vivid details that captured the Greek imagination. For them, it represented the ultimate in luxurious Eastern exoticism. The glaring problem is archaeology. Extensive excavations at the site of ancient Babylon, in modern-day Iraq, have revealed the grandeur of Nebuchadnezzar's city, the famous Ishtar Gate, the massive walls, and the foundation of a great ziggurat. But no structure matching the description of the Hanging Gardens has ever been identified. There are no inscriptions from Nebuchadnezzar boasting of such a project, which would be highly unusual for a king who left records of all his other building achievements. This absence has led some scholars to propose a stunning theory that the gardens were not in Babylon at all, but were a real wonder in the Assyrian city of Nineveh, built by King Sennacherib a century earlier. His palace inscriptions describe a vast garden irrigated by a sophisticated system of canals and an enormous water-raising screw, a detail that matches the later Greek accounts perfectly. Could the story have migrated and been attached to the more famous city of Babylon over time? The possibility turns the mystery inside out, so we are left with a beautiful enigma. Did the Hanging Gardens exist as a literal, physical place, a testament to a king's devotion and his engineer's genius? Or were they a literary mirage, a composite fantasy woven from travelers' tales, conflated histories, and the universal human desire to believe in a paradise on earth? They stand in our imagination as the wonder that might have been, a symbol that the most enduring creations are sometimes built not from stone but from story. And from the possibility of a garden suspended in memory, we turn to a figure who was very much real, a statue of a god so magnificent it was said to stop hearts. This phantom garden has sent scholars on a quest to find its true home. The most compelling redirection comes from Oxford researcher Stephanie Daly, who spent decades piecing together an alternative history. Her theory is bold: the Hanging Gardens were real, but they were not in Babylon. They were the crowning achievement of the Assyrian king Sennacherib at his capital, Nineveh, built around 700 before the Common Era, a full century before Nebuchadnezzar. Daly's evidence is drawn from a close reading of ancient cuneiform tablets. Sennacherib's own palace inscriptions boast of a marvelous garden, a replica of a mountainous landscape, which he watered with an ambitious system of canals and aqueducts stretching over 30 miles from the mountains. Most strikingly, he describes a new innovation for raising water in great volume, bronze screws operating within a pipe. This is a direct match to the Archimedes screw described by later Greek writers, a device the Greeks believed was invented centuries later. Could the technology have been known in Assyria long before Archimedes gave it his name? The engineering required was staggering. To create a hanging garden, you need more than just water. You need to lift it constantly and reliably to a great height. An Archimedes screw, a giant spiral within a cylinder when turned by manpower, can lift water efficiently from a source like a river or a reservoir to an upper terrace. A series of these screws, powered by teams of workers, could create a chain, passing water from one level to the next. Combine this with vast stone aqueducts bringing mountain water to the city, and you have the hydraulic skeleton for a true hanging garden. Sennacherib's inscriptions are not vague poetry, they are technical manuals of pride. So how did the gardens get credited to Babylon? Daly suggests it was a case of historical blurring. After the Assyrian Empire fell, its great capital of Nineveh was sacked and left in ruins. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, led by Nebuchadnezzar, rose in its place. Over centuries, as the memory of Assyria faded, the most spectacular achievement of the region, this mountain of gardens, may have been reassigned in popular Greek travelogues to the more famous and still powerful city of Babylon. It is a classic case of the victors, or at least the survivors, inheriting the legends. This theory forces us to confront a fascinating possibility. Perhaps the Hanging Gardens were not a myth, but a marvel that simply existed in the wrong place in our history books, waiting for a scholar to reconnect the story to its original, forgotten engineer. Yet, even with this compelling evidence, doubt persists. Without physical ruins definitively identified as the garden structure in Nineveh, the wonder remains in a limbo between history and legend. Could it have been, instead, a literary device? In ancient texts, the garden was often a metaphor for royal power and prosperity, a symbol of a king's ability to tame nature itself. Describing a paradise in the desert may have been a way for writers to encapsulate the wealth and sophistication of the East for their Greek audiences. The story of a lovesick queen and a devoted king is a powerful narrative, one that might have been more appealing and more memorable than a dry administrative report on irrigation. So we are left with three distinct visions: a real physical garden in Babylon, lost to time and archaeology; a real physical garden in Nineveh, mislabeled by history; or a beautiful fiction, a collective dream of an impossible oasis that says more about what we wish to believe than what actually was. This is the unique power of the Hanging Gardens. They challenge our very definition of a wonder. Must it be made of stone to be real, or can it be built from words, desire, and the enduring human need for paradise? From this elusive dream of greenery, we journey to a sanctuary where the divine was believed to dwell in gold and ivory. While the gardens remain a beautiful uncertainty, the awe felt at the third wonder was recorded in trembling certainty. In the sacred grove of Olympia, home to the ancient Olympic Games, stood a temple that housed not just a statue but the perceived presence of a god. The statue of Zeus was the work of the master sculptor Phidias, already famous for overseeing the sculptures of the Parthenon in Athens. His commission here was to create the ultimate representation of the king of the gods, a figure to unite the warring Greek city-states in shared reverence. The result was a masterpiece of a technique called chryselephantine, a lavish combination of gold and ivory over a wooden framework. Imagine the process: skilled artisans carefully fitting thin plates of gleaming, solid gold for the gods' robes and accessories. For the flesh, they used massive, curved slabs of ivory, soaked and molded to shape, giving Zeus a lifelike, luminous skin that seemed to glow with divine vitality. The scale was deliberately overwhelming. Seated on an ornate throne, the statue rose to a height of about 40 feet, its head nearly brushing the ceiling of the temple. If Zeus were to stand, ancient writers claimed he would have unroofed the building. This was not a sculpture you simply looked at, it was an environment you entered, a confrontation with majesty. The throne itself was a universe of myth carved in ebony, ivory, gold, and precious stones. Its panels and supports were covered with intricate reliefs depicting gods, heroes, and legendary battles. Figures of Nike, the goddess of victory, stood at the armrests. Sphinxes, mythical guardians, supported the throne's legs. Even the footstool was decorated with a scene of a battle against the Amazons. Every detail served to place Zeus at the center of the entire Greek cosmos, the literal and figurative king presiding over all stories. But the true genius of Phidias lay in the expression he gave to the god's face. Ancient sources describe a Zeus who was both powerfully majestic and deeply serene. In one hand, he held a life-sized statue of Nike offering victory. In the other, a magnificent scepter topped with an eagle, his sacred bird. His eyes seemed to look down upon worshippers with a gaze that was stern yet benevolent, a perfect balance of authority and grace. For the athletes and pilgrims who traveled to Olympia every 4 years, the sight was transformative. After days of brutal competition in the stadium nearby, they would finally enter the temple's dim, incense-filled interior. To stand before this shimmering giant, to feel the weight of that crafted gaze, was to believe truly and physically that you were in the presence of Zeus himself. It was the spiritual heart of the Pan-Hellenic world, a symbol that above the rivalries of Sparta and Athens, there was a higher, unifying power. The statue's fate, however, was tied to the rise of a new god. As Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, pagan temples were closed. The Olympic Games were abolished by Emperor Theodosius I in the late 4th century of the Common Era. The great temple of Zeus fell into disuse. For a time, the statue was moved to a palace in Constantinople, perhaps in a last-ditch effort to preserve it. But around the year 475, a devastating fire consumed the palace. The gold melted away, the ivory was reduced to ash, and the wooden skeleton was utterly destroyed. The physical embodiment of the king of the gods vanished from the earth, leaving only echoes in the accounts of those who had been struck dumb by its glory. Its destruction marks a pivotal moment, the end of one world's wonder and the fading of its god. Yet from the ashes of this lost divinity, we travel to a monument that celebrated not a god, but the memory of a mortal man, a tomb so grandiose it spawned a new word for monumental graves. For nearly 900 years, the statue of Zeus presided over Olympia. It survived wars, political upheavals, and the slow shift in beliefs, not as a forgotten relic but as a living legend. Its caretakers performed repairs over the centuries, patching the delicate ivory and securing the gold plates. Even the whims of Roman emperors acknowledged its power. The infamous Caligula, who demanded his own head be placed on the bodies of famous Greek statues, reportedly ordered the Zeus of Olympia to be brought to Rome. According to the historian Suetonius, the workmen sent to dismantle it were driven away when the statue itself burst into a fit of laughter, causing the scaffolding to collapse. Whether true or a tale spun to protect the treasure, the story underscores the statue's untouchable, almost supernatural status in the ancient mind. Its final chapter is shrouded in conflicting accounts, a fitting end for a wonder of mythic stature. The most widely accepted story is that by the 5th century, the statue was removed to the palace of a wealthy Roman nobleman in Constantinople for safekeeping. There, around the year 475, a great fire swept through the palace district. The Chryselephantine construction, with its wooden core, gold skin, and ivory flesh, would have been the perfect fuel for an inferno. The gold melted into pools, the ivory vanished in smoke, and the world's most famous image of the god was reduced to memory. Other sources suggest it was looted and destroyed earlier, or that pieces were carried off in the chaotic sack of Constantinople centuries later. The truth is, we do not know its final hour. It simply faded from the historical record, a ghost in the smoke of a dying empire. Yet, if the physical statue was lost, its artistic soul proved immortal. Phidias had not merely built a statue, he had defined a god. His vision of a mature, bearded Zeus, majestic yet serene, holding a scepter and a figure of victory, became the template for every subsequent depiction of the king of the gods in both Greek and Roman art. Coins, smaller statues, and frescoes for 1,000 years afterward were all echoes of that original masterpiece. More profoundly, the statue of Zeus set the ultimate standard for what a cult statue should be. It was the focal point of a religion, an object designed not just for admiration, but for genuine awe and communion. It demonstrated that art could serve as a vessel for the divine, a concept that would profoundly influence later traditions in sacred spaces far beyond the Greek world. The wonder was gone, but its shadow stretched across the centuries, and from this legacy of divine representation, we journey to a monument born from a very human and very personal devotion. While the statue of Zeus celebrated a single divine figure, the next wonder was a sanctuary of breathtaking scale, a forest of marble dedicated to a goddess of the wild. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was not merely a building, it was a city within a city, an architectural declaration so grand it reportedly left visitors speechless. To understand its size, picture the Parthenon in Athens, that iconic symbol of classical Greece. The Temple of Artemis was at least 4 times larger in area, a colossal platform stretching over 400 feet long and 200 feet wide. Upon this platform stood a forest of 127 marble columns, each soaring 60 feet high. They were not plain pillars, but works of art themselves, carved with intricate sculptural reliefs at their bases. The entire structure, from its steps to its roof, was built from gleaming white marble, a rarity and an extravagance that made it shine like a beacon across the coastal plain. This was not a monument designed for subtlety, it was meant to overwhelm. The goddess honored here was Artemis, but not the familiar huntress of Greek myth. The Ephesian Artemis was an ancient pre-Greek deity of fertility and nature, a protector of the wild and the vulnerable. Her cult statue within the temple reflected this unique identity. Unlike the graceful maiden with a bow, this Artemis stood rigid, her lower body wrapped in a skirt adorned with carved animals, bees, and flowers. Her torso was covered with what appeared to be multiple breasts or perhaps bull testicles, symbols of nourishment and prolific abundance. This was a mother goddess of immense power, and her temple was designed to match that stature. The artworks inside were legendary. The best sculptors and painters of the age contributed, including the famed Praxiteles. The interior was a gallery of masterpieces with paintings, golden lamps, and silver statues that turned the sanctuary into a treasure house of ancient art. The temple's reputation for providing sanctuary was ironclad. Anyone, from a fleeing slave to a deposed king, could find safety within its boundaries, a tradition that turned the sacred precinct into a unique crossroads of human drama and desperation. But this wonder was also a powerhouse of commerce. The Temple of Artemis functioned as the central bank and economic engine of Ephesus, one of the richest ports in the ancient world. Pilgrims flocked from across the Mediterranean, needing lodging, food, and sacrificial animals. Craftsmen sold miniature silver replicas of the temple as souvenirs. The temple priests managed vast lands and financial assets, lending money and underwriting trade deals. It was a holy site that understood its balance sheet, where the spiritual and the mercantile existed in seamless, bustling harmony. This fusion of faith and finance made it the heart of the city, both its spiritual soul and its economic pulse. Yet this very prominence made it a target, a symbol of pagan wealth and power standing in the path of changing times. Its fate would be a cycle of destruction and rebirth, a story of resilience that would ultimately meet an end as dramatic as its conception. That fusion of faith and finance made the temple a glittering target. Its first great catastrophe arrived not from an invading army, but from the ambition of a single, desperate man. On a July night in the year 356 before the Common Era, a local Ephesian named Herostratus set fire to the wooden roof beams of the great temple. The flames, fanned by the coastal wind, quickly engulfed the structure. The marble columns, subjected to intense heat, cracked and exploded like stone trees. By morning, one of the world's most magnificent buildings was a smoldering ruin. Herostratus, upon capture, confessed his motive was simple: to achieve immortal fame. The outraged city council sentenced him to death and issued a decree that his name was never to be recorded or spoken again. It was a punishment meant to erase him from history. Yet the historian Theopompus, writing later, could not resist mentioning the story, and so the name Herostratus survived, becoming synonymous with someone who commits a monstrous act purely for notoriety. The timing of the fire was seen as profoundly significant by ancient writers. That very same night, far to the north in Macedonia, a prince was born. The Temple of Artemis burned as Alexander the Great entered the world. The historian Plutarch later wrote that the goddess was too busy attending the birth of the future conqueror to save her own house. It was a poetic link between the death of one wonder and the dawn of an empire that would reshape the map. From the ashes, the Ephesians resolved to rebuild, and they did so with astonishing ambition. They used the original foundation, but the new temple was even more magnificent. They persuaded neighboring cities and kingdoms to contribute funds and materials. The legendary architect Chirocrates, who would later plan the city of Alexandria for Alexander, is said to have overseen the design. This second temple retained the staggering scale of the first, but was adorned with even more lavish sculptures and decorations. It stood for another 6 centuries, a symbol of resilience, surviving earthquakes and shifting political tides. Its final end came not from accident, but from a deliberate shift in the world's beliefs. In the year 262 of the Common Era, a raiding band of Goths sacked Ephesus and badly damaged the temple. Though it was partially repaired, its role as a central pagan shrine was doomed in the rapidly Christianizing Roman Empire. The final blow came in the early 5th century. Led by a zealous archbishop, a Christian mob tore down what remained. They toppled the columns, smashed the statues of Artemis, and carried off the marble to be used as building material for churches, bridges, and fortifications. The great temple was systematically dismantled, its stones becoming the anonymous bones of a new city. Even its precise location was lost to memory, buried under centuries of silt from the Cayster River. For modern archaeologists, finding the Temple of Artemis became a tantalizing puzzle. In the late 19th century, a British engineer named John Turtle Wood, obsessed with the legend, spent 6 years digging through the swampy plain near Ephesus. After countless setbacks and malarial fevers, he finally struck marble in 1869. He had found the foundation, confirming the temple's immense size and its alignment. Later excavations revealed more, including fragments of the sculpted column drums and copies of the famous cult statue. Today, a single, reconstructed column stands in a marshy field, a lonely sentinel marking where a forest of marble once reached for the sky. All that remains is a haunting absence, a flat space that once held a universe of devotion and wealth. This pattern of creation and erasure leads us to a wonder built for a different kind of devotion, one that mixed royal love with political propaganda, resulting in a tomb of such sublime beauty its name became a byword for any grand memorial. A tomb can be more than a resting place, it can be a political statement carved in stone. In the city of Halicarnassus, on the coast of what is now Turkey, a ruler named Mausolus commissioned his own immortality. He was a satrap, a provincial governor for the Persian Empire, but his ambitions stretched far beyond his official title. He dreamed of a Hellenistic kingdom, a cultural fusion where Persian power met Greek artistry. And to secure his legacy, he and his wife Artemisia planned a monument so audacious it would forever change the language of death. They built the mausoleum, a name that would come to define any grand above-ground tomb. The structure was a deliberate architectural symphony, blending styles to project a universal majesty. Its massive rectangular base, over 100 feet on each side, was reminiscent of the stepped platforms of Near Eastern temples. Rising from this base was a colonnade of 36 slender, graceful Ionic columns, pure Greek elegance. Above the columns sat a pyramid, a 24-step tribute to the eternal forms of Egypt. And crowning the very peak was the Piece de Resistance, a colossal marble statue of a 4-horse chariot, with Mausolus and Artemisia standing proudly as the drivers. This was not a hidden crypt, it was a skyscraper of the ancient world, towering nearly 150 feet over the harbor, designed to dominate the skyline and announce the dynasty's glory for all arriving ships to see. But the true wonder was in the details, a gallery of sculpture that wrapped the entire monument. The finest artists of the Greek world were summoned, each assigned a side of the building to decorate. Masters like Scopas, known for his emotionally charged figures, and Leochares worked alongside others, creating a continuous frieze of breathtaking action. One famous panel depicted the Amazonomachy, the mythical battle between Greeks and Amazons, a chaotic whirlwind of muscular warriors and rearing horses carved with such depth they seemed to leap from the stone. Another showed a chariot race, the tension palpable in every straining limb. These were not mere decorations, they were narratives of power, heroism, and civilization, positioning Mausolus's reign within the grand tapestry of epic legend. The interior was just as opulent, though less described by history. We know it housed the actual sarcophagi of Mausolus and Artemisia in a lavish chamber, likely adorned with gold and precious stones. The genius of the design was its layered public appeal. From a distance, it was a stunning silhouette. Up close, a citizen could walk its perimeter and be educated and entertained by the highest art of the age. It was a public park, an art museum, and a propaganda machine all in one, celebrating a ruler who understood that memory is built not just in the minds of the people, but in the very stone of their city. Yet for all its planned permanence, the fate of the mausoleum, like the Temple of Artemis, would be a slow unraveling by time, earthquake, and finally, the pragmatic hands of knights seeking not art but building blocks for a fortress. The mausoleum's layered message of power ensured its influence long after the dynasty it celebrated had faded. For roughly 16 centuries, it dominated the harbor of Halicarnassus, a landmark so synonymous with monumental tombs that its very name entered the language. The concept of a mausoleum, a grand, free-standing structure built to house the dead, became its most enduring legacy. Emperors and kings for millennia would look to Mausolus's example when designing their own final resting places, seeking that same fusion of permanence and propaganda. But the stone itself was not destined to last as long as the idea. A series of devastating earthquakes between the 12th and 15th centuries shook the region. The tall, elegant columns and the heavy pyramid roof were the most vulnerable, collapsing first. The structure was gradually reduced to a picturesque ruin, a hill of beautiful marble blocks that still hinted at its former glory. It was in this state that a new order of warriors found it, men with a very different kind of devotion. In the early 15th century, the Knights of St. John, a Christian military order, occupied the area and began constructing a massive fortress to defend against the Ottoman Empire. To them, the ruins of the mausoleum were not a sacred site to be preserved, but a convenient and high-quality quarry. They systematically dismantled what remained, hauling the gleaming green and white marble blocks up the hill to build the formidable walls of Badrum Castle. They even burned much of the remaining sculptural frieze to make lime for mortar, an act of utilitarian destruction that makes archaeologists wince. The wonder was literally baked into the walls of a medieval fortress, its artistic soul sacrificed for military necessity. For centuries, the mausoleum seemed lost, its memory preserved only in ancient texts and the word it had spawned. Then, in the 1850s, a determined British diplomat and archaeologist named Charles Newton took up the search. He secured funding from the British Museum and arrived at Bodrum with a clear mission: to find the exact site and recover whatever sculptures might have escaped the Knights' lime kilns. His work was a meticulous puzzle. He first identified the likely location by studying ancient descriptions and the local topography. Then, through careful excavation, he unearthed the massive foundation platform, confirming the building's staggering footprint. But the true triumphs came as his team dug deeper. They discovered sections of the frieze that had been buried and thus spared, including breathtaking panels of the Amazonomachy. Most spectacularly, they found two monumental statues that had once stood somewhere within the colonnade. These were identified as Mausolus and Artemisia, though which figure is which remains a scholarly debate. The statues are masterworks of 4th century Greek sculpture, depicting the rulers in a serene, idealized manner, draped in fine robes, their expressions calm and commanding. They are not portraits in a modern sense, but embodiments of royal virtue and authority. Newton also recovered the remnants of the colossal chariot group that crowned the pyramid, including a magnificent, life-sized horse. These discoveries, now housed in the British Museum, allowed the world to finally visualize the wonder in concrete detail. They told a story of artistic collaboration, political ambition, and a love so profound it built a mountain to be remembered by. The excavation was a rescue mission for memory, pulling the mausoleum back from the realm of pure text and into the physical world, even if its pieces now rest far from the Turkish coast. This pattern of a wonder being repurposed, then rediscovered, leads us to the final two marvels which represent the peak of human technical achievement in the ancient world, one reaching for the sun, the other mastering the sea. Bronze in the ancient world was the medium of gods and heroes. On the island of Rhodes, they used it to build a god of their own, a thank you note to the heavens cast in metal on a scale that defied belief. The Colossus of Rhodes was born from a desperate victory. In the early 3rd century before the Common Era, the island city faced a massive invasion by Demetrius Poliorcetes, a Macedonian warlord known as the Besieger of Cities. He brought an army of 40,000 men and a fleet of towering siege engines, including a monstrous ironclad battering ram called the Helepolis, or Taker of Cities. For a full year, the Rhodians held out, their walls tested by this relentless machinery. When a fleet from Ptolemaic Egypt finally arrived to break the siege, Demetrius abandoned his colossal war machines on the beach and fled. To celebrate their salvation, the Rhodians decided to create a permanent monument. They did not just build a statue, they recycled their enemies' very weapons of destruction. The bronze and iron from the abandoned siege engines were melted down, the instruments of war reforged into a symbol of peace and divine protection. they commissioned the sculptor Chairs of Lindos, a student of the great Lysippos, to create a statue of their patron god, Helios, the sun god who watched over the island. The scale of the project was staggering. For 12 years, from around 294 to 282 before the Common Era, the city dedicated its wealth and labor to the construction. The finished colossus stood approximately 110 feet tall, making it nearly as high as the modern Statue of Liberty from heel to crown. Imagine a figure so tall that a man standing at its foot would be level with its ankle. It was the tallest statue in the ancient world, a gleaming titan of bronze that would have required a mountain of clay, stone, and iron to build. The construction method was as ingenious as it was arduous. Chairs did not attempt to cast the entire figure in one impossible pour. Instead, he used a technique called lost wax casting on a monumental scale. Workers first built a stone and iron framework on the chosen site, likely a hill overlooking the main harbor. They then fashioned the outer form of the god in clay over this armature. This clay model was covered in a layer of wax, which was then encased in another layer of clay, creating a mold. When fired, the wax melted and drained away, leaving a hollow space between the two clay layers. Molten bronze from the enemy's weapons was then poured into that space. Once the bronze cooled and hardened, the outer clay mold was broken away, revealing a finished section of the statue's skin. This process was repeated piece by piece, section by section, as the colossus rose slowly from its base, like a giant being assembled from a divine puzzle. Now we must address the most persistent myth, the iconic image of the colossus straddling the harbor entrance, with ships passing between its legs. As dramatic as that picture is, it is almost certainly a medieval invention. The engineering challenges would have been insurmountable. To span the harbor mouth, the statue would have needed to be over 400 feet tall, and its legs would have had to be placed on two separate, unstable moles constantly battered by waves and tides, creating a structural nightmare. More convincingly, ancient sources simply do not describe it that way. The historian Strabo, writing about 2 centuries after its fall, notes that the statue lay broken near the harbor, but he says nothing about ships sailing beneath it. It is far more likely the colossus stood on a massive pedestal on a promontory or hill overlooking the Mandrake harbor, one arm raised, perhaps holding a torch or a spear, visible to every ship approaching the island. It was a guardian, not a gate. Its purpose was to be seen, a gleaming, sun-catched symbol of Rhodian independence and piety that dominated the skyline for a tragically short time. The wonder's earthly life was brief. After standing for just 56 years, a massive earthquake struck Rhodes in around 226 before the Common Era. The quake snapped the colossus at its knees, sending the giant tumbling to the ground. According to the geographer Strabo, it broke into large pieces, and the sight of the shattered god was so awe-inspiring that people traveled from distant lands just to see the ruins. The Rhodians, offered financial help by King Ptolemy III of Egypt to rebuild it, consulted an oracle. The oracle warned that rebuilding it would offend the god Helios, so they left the colossal fragments right where they fell. For nearly 900 years, the broken pieces of the sun god became a tourist attraction in their own right, a monument to transience. People marveled at the size of a single finger, larger than most statues. The fallen giant was a lesson in humility, a reminder that even the mightiest works of human hands are subject to the earth's tremors. Finally, in the 7th century of the Common Era, with the island under Arab rule, a merchant purchased the bronze scraps. He reportedly needed 900 camels to carry all the metal away to be melted down for coins, tools, and weapons. The colossus was gone, leaving behind only a legend and a powerful question. What does it mean to build something so grand that its broken pieces remain a wonder for centuries? From this shattered giant of bronze, our journey turns to the final wonder, a tower of fire that did not celebrate a god or a king, but served every sailor who dared the treacherous coast, a beacon of pure, practical genius that guided an age of learning into port. The Colossus stood for a mere 56 years, a brief flicker in the long memory of the Mediterranean. Then, around 226 years before the Common Era, the Earth itself rebelled. A powerful earthquake shattered the island of Rhodes, and the great statue, its hollow bronze legs no match for the violent tremors, snapped at the knees. It fell with a crash that must have echoed for miles. The sun god toppled into the dirt. What followed was a scene of profound and melancholy wonder. The Rhodians, consulting an oracle, decided not to rebuild. So for the next 8 centuries, the broken pieces of Helios lay exactly where they fell, a colossal ruin slowly being reclaimed by grass and weather. This was not a forgotten heap of scrap metal. It became one of the ancient world's most famous attractions. Travelers from across the Roman Empire made pilgrimages just to see it. They would walk among the giant bronze plates, each one larger than a man. They marveled at the size of a single finger, at the cavernous interior of a broken arm. It was a lesson in the fragility of human ambition, a real-life version of the poem Ozymandias, written millennia later. Here was a king of the gods brought low, and people found its shattered state more awe-inspiring than its former wholeness. The final chapter is one of pragmatic erasure. In the 7th century of the Common Era, Rhodes came under the rule of the Arab Umayyad Caliphate. A merchant from the city of Edessa saw not a sacred ruin but a mountain of valuable metal. He purchased the rights to the bronze scraps and spent months cutting and hauling the pieces away. Tradition says it took a caravan of 900 camels to carry all that remained of the Colossus off to be melted down. The bronze that had once formed a god was likely turned into coins, tools, or weapons, its divine image dissolved into the mundane commerce of a new age. Yet, in its destruction, the Colossus achieved a different kind of immortality. Its legend, particularly the later medieval myth of it straddling the harbor, cemented it as the ultimate symbol of gigantic statuary. It directly inspired the conception of the Statue of Liberty, with its raised torch and role as a beacon to the sea. Every monumental statue that seeks to embody an idea, from the motherland calls in Russia to the Spring Temple Buddha in China, walks in the long shadow of that fallen Rhodian giant. The Colossus taught the world that a wonder could be defined not just by its creation, but by the haunting power of its ruin. The fallen Colossus was a monument to transience, but the final wonder was built for endurance. On a small island at the edge of Egypt's coast, the lighthouse of Alexandria was not a tomb or a temple, it was a machine. Its purpose was brilliantly simple: to save lives and guide commerce. Known as the Pharaohs after the island it stood upon, this structure became so famous that its name entered languages across the world as the word for lighthouse. It was the last of the 7 wonders to be built, and arguably the most practical, a towering fusion of science, engineering, and sheer necessity. The city it served was the brainchild of Alexander the Great, a planned metropolis intended to be the intellectual and economic capital of his empire. Alexandria's success depended entirely on its 2 magnificent harbors, but the approach was treacherous, a flat coastline with hidden sandbars and reefs. Without a landmark, ships risked wrecking before they ever reached the safety of the port. The first Ptolemy, Alexander's successor in Egypt, envisioned a solution so grand it would define the skyline. His son, Ptolemy II, saw it through to completion around 280 before the Common Era. The design was revolutionary, a 3-tiered masterpiece that rose to a height scholars estimate between 330 and 400 feet, making it one of the tallest man-made structures in the world for many centuries. The base was a massive square block housing administrative offices, storage rooms, and a ramp wide enough for donkeys to haul fuel to the top. Above this rose an elegant octagonal middle section, and finally, a cylindrical top crowned with the beacon itself. The entire exterior was faced in gleaming white marble, making it a dazzling daytime landmark, but its true genius was revealed at night. At the summit, a great furnace burned, likely fueled by wood or resin. Ancient sources describe a sophisticated optical system, a giant polished bronze mirror. During the day, this mirror could reflect the sun's rays, creating a visible column of light for miles out to sea. At night, it would reflect and intensify the fire's glow, projecting it far across the dark water. Some accounts even suggest the mirror could be used as a weapon, focusing the sun's rays to ignite enemy ships, though this is likely legend. The effect, however, was undeniable. For the first time in history, sailors had a reliable, man-made star to steer by, a fixed point in the chaos of wind and wave. This beacon did more than prevent shipwrecks, it fueled an empire of the mind. The safe, reliable port allowed Alexandria to flourish as the greatest trading hub of the Mediterranean. Wealth flowed in, and with it, knowledge. The city became home to the legendary Library of Alexandria, a repository for all the world's known scrolls, and the Mauseon, a research institute that attracted the greatest thinkers of the age. The lighthouse, in a very real sense, guided not just ships but the entire Hellenistic age of learning into harbor. It stood as a silent partner to genius, ensuring the safe passage of the scholars, texts, and ideas that would gather in the city below. For over 1,600 years, the pharaohs kept its watch, surviving longer than any other wonder save the Great Pyramid. It witnessed the fall of the Ptolemies, the rise of Rome, and the spread of Christianity. Its form was so iconic that it was copied across the Roman world, from Spain to the Black Sea, establishing the very archetype of what a lighthouse should be. It was a wonder that worked day and night for centuries, a steadfast guardian whose light ultimately faded not from neglect, but from the slow, relentless tremor of the earth beneath it. That mirror was the lighthouse's beating heart, a technological marvel that turned simple fire into a guiding star. Ancient accounts describe a massive, polished bronze reflector, likely parabolic in shape to focus the light. During the day, it would capture and reflect the sun's rays, creating a brilliant column of light visible far out to sea. At night, it amplified the glow from the great furnace, projecting the fire's beacon an astonishing 30 miles or more. This was not just a bonfire on a tower, it was an early form of optical engineering, a deliberate manipulation of light on a scale never before attempted. Fueling that eternal flame was a logistical challenge of its own. Inside the massive square base, a spiraling internal ramp, wide enough for a team of donkeys, wound its way up to the summit. Day and night, workers would drive these animals up the gentle slope, their carts laden with wood or possibly resinous fuel to feed the fire. This ingenious ramp allowed for continuous operation without requiring impossible feats of strength, turning the lighthouse into a machine with a steady, reliable pulse. For over 1,600 years, that pulse held steady, but the earth beneath Alexandria had other plans. A series of earthquakes beginning in the 10th century of the Common Era started the pharaohs' long, slow decline. The first major quake in 956 damaged the top section, including the iconic statue of Poseidon or Zeus that crowned it. Repairs were made, but the structure was altered. Then, in 1303, a more violent quake struck, causing catastrophic damage. The octagonal middle section collapsed entirely. By this time, Egypt was under Mamluk rule, and the ruined stump of the great lighthouse was seen as a strategic fortification. Sultan Qaitbay ordered a medieval fortress to be built on the original site, using the fallen marble and granite blocks from the pharaohs itself. The wonder was literally quarried to build its own replacement, its stones forming the walls of the citadel of Qaitbay, which still stands today. The final remnants of the upper tower, weakened and unstable, are believed to have crumbled in another quake around the middle of the 14th century. The greatest lighthouse in history had finally been extinguished, not by storm or war, but by the patient, grinding power of the planet. For centuries, its physical existence faded into legend, its precise location and form debated by scholars. Then, in 1994, a team of underwater archaeologists made a discovery that brought the myth back into the realm of the real. Diving in the murky waters of Alexandria's eastern harbor, they found a submerged treasure trove. Massive stone blocks, some weighing up to 75 tons, lay scattered across the seafloor. Among them were colossal statues, including one believed to be a Ptolemaic king depicted as the god of the sea, and a stunning sphinx. These were not random shipwrecks. This was a deliberate deposit, the ruins of the pharaohs toppled into the sea by those final, devastating quakes. The discovery was a revelation, confirming the lighthouse's immense scale and the lavish artistry that adorned even its functional form. Today, those silent stones on the seabed are the final, physical whispers of a wonder that once lit the way for an age of knowledge. These colossal monuments were never simply feats of engineering. They were carefully crafted messages. Beneath the marble and bronze, two powerful currents flowed through every wonder, the relentless drive for political power and the deep well of religious devotion. Often, these forces were inseparable, two sides of the same coin minted to buy immortality. Look at the most obvious examples. The Great Pyramid was the ultimate political statement, a mountain built by and for a single man, Pharaoh Khufu. Its scale screamed absolute authority, a demonstration that one ruler could command the labor of an entire nation for decades to serve his passage to the afterlife. It was power made literal, stone upon stone. Similarly, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus was not a quiet tomb. It was a dynastic billboard. Mausolus, a provincial governor, used Greek artists and Egyptian forms to construct a propaganda machine that announced his kingdom's cultural and political arrival on the world stage. His eternal home was designed to make visitors and subjects alike feel dwarfed, imprinting the permanence of his rule onto the landscape itself. Yet that power was almost always sanctified by the divine. The statue of Zeus and the temple of Artemis were first and foremost houses of the gods, designed to inspire pious awe. But their staggering scale and opulence also broadcast the wealth and piety of the cities that built them. Olympia, by creating the most magnificent image of the chief god, positioned itself as the spiritual center of the Greek world. Ephesus, through its temple bank, showed that its patron goddess blessed the city with both spiritual and material prosperity. The message to rivals and citizens was clear: our God is great, and therefore so are we. Even the lighthouse of Alexandria, that most practical wonder, served a dual purpose. While it saved lives, its incredible height and daytime mirror sent a signal to every approaching ship. Alexandria is a city of such advanced knowledge and capability that it can tame the very sea for your safe passage. It projected the Ptolemaic dynasty's enlightenment and control, making commerce and loyalty the natural response. This fusion created a potent tool for ruling. A subject who looks at a pyramid or a mausoleum and feels awe is also feeling the weight of the ruler's legitimacy. A pilgrim who trembles before the Zeus of Olympia associates that holy dread with the city that hosts him. These wonders were psychological anchors built to cement loyalty, attract wealth, and deter challenge through sheer overwhelming presence. They asked a silent, imposing question: how could you possibly oppose the will of someone who commands the gods and moves mountains? The answer, etched in stone and gleaming in gold, was that you could not. This intricate dance between the earthly throne and the heavenly altar reveals the ancient blueprint for legacy, where to be remembered forever, you had to build for both man and God. That ambition to command both heaven and earth demanded more than just wealth or slaves. It required a symphony of human ingenuity. Each wonder was a unique engineering puzzle, solved with a blend of raw intuition, meticulous mathematics, and artistic genius that still leaves us breathless. Consider the sheer variety of problems these ancient builders faced. For the Great Pyramid, the monumental challenge was mass and precision, moving 2.5 million multi-ton blocks across miles of desert and stacking them with celestial alignment. They likely used sledges on wetted sand to reduce friction, an ingenious application of basic physics. and their mastery of geometry allowed them to square a 13-acre base to within a fraction of an inch. This was not brute force, it was applied mathematics on a staggering scale. At Rhodes, the problem was stability and form. To create the Colossus, Chairs and his team had to solve the riddle of casting a hollow bronze giant that could stand against the wind. Their piecemeal lost wax method was a stroke of brilliance, building the statue upward from within its own scaffolding, section by section, like a three-dimensional puzzle where each bronze plate had to fit perfectly. They were manipulating material properties, understanding how metal cools and contracts, to create an illusion of solid divinity from a shell of bronze. Then there was the presumed challenge of the Hanging Gardens, whether in Babylon or Nineveh, lifting vast quantities of water against gravity to nourish an artificial mountain. The solution, possibly the screw pump, was a revolutionary piece of hydraulic engineering, turning a simple inclined plane into a spiral inside a cylinder harnessed rotational force to do the work of thousands of laborers carrying buckets. It transformed human or animal power into a continuous, reliable flow, a mechanical heart for a living, breathing monument. And finally, the Lighthouse of Alexandria presented a triad of obstacles: foundation, height, and optics. Building a structure nearly 400 feet tall on a small, wave-battered island required a deep understanding of load-bearing mechanics and foundation engineering. The massive square base acted as a stabilizer against the sea. The internal ramp was a logistical masterstroke, ensuring the beacon's flame never died. But the crowning innovation was optical, the great polished mirror. This was an early experiment in focused light, a deliberate attempt to bend physics to human will, extending the safe passage of ships far beyond the natural reach of any flame. Behind every chisel mark and bronze pour was an artist. The precise, emotion-filled folds of Zeus' golden robes, the dynamic chaos of the Amazonamachy frieze on the mausoleum, the serene, commanding faces of Mausolus and Artemisia, these were not afterthoughts. They were integral to the wonder. The engineering made the structures stand, but the artistry made them speak, telling stories of power, piety, and myth that transformed stone and metal into cultural icons. This fusion is what elevated them from construction projects to wonders. They remind us that the ancient world's greatest achievements were never just about what they built, but how they thought, solving impossible problems with a creativity that bridged the gap between the earthly and the sublime. The engineering that made them stand could not make them last. For all their grandeur, the seven wonders whisper a humbling truth about the fragility of human ambition. Only one, the Great Pyramid of Giza, remains in a form we can truly witness. The others were claimed by a relentless quartet of forces, each a story of impermanence. The earth itself rebelled, shattering the Colossus of Rhodes, and centuries later, the Lighthouse of Alexandria with violent tremors. Fire, whether from a madman's torch at Ephesus or a palace blaze in Constantinople, consumed the temple of Artemis and the statue of Zeus. Deliberate human destruction, driven by new faiths or pragmatic need, saw the temple of Artemis dismantled for churches and the mausoleum quarried for a fortress. And then there is the slow, silent erosion, the repurposing of materials that saw the bronze of the Colossus carted away on 900 camels to be melted into coins. These were not accidents of neglect, but the inevitable consequences of existing in a changing world. Their very destruction, however, deepens their mystique. A perfect, gleaming temple is a statement of power, but a broken one is a poem. The fallen Colossus, a tourist attraction for 8 centuries, inspired more philosophical awe in its ruin than it ever did standing. The absence of the Hanging Gardens fuels endless speculation, proving that a wonder built from story can be more durable than one built from stone. This fragility makes the solitary survivor, the pyramid, seem not just old but almost supernatural in its endurance. It has watched empires that marveled at the other wonders rise and turn to dust. Its persistence is the exception that highlights the rule, a silent mountain that underscores the transience of everything else we build. In this, the Seven Wonders become more than a list of tourist sites. They become a profound metaphor. They map the life cycle of civilizations themselves, the audacious rise, the glorious peak, and the inevitable decline, whether by cataclysm or the slow forgetting of years. We build our towers to the sun, but time is the sea that eventually washes every shore. Yet the stones, even when lost, refuse to remain silent. Our modern age has not surrendered to the mystery of the Seven Wonders. Instead, we have launched a new kind of quest, armed not with chisels and papyrus, but with sonar, satellite imagery, and scholarly deduction. This is a detective story written in the language of soil strata and scattered fragments. At Ephesus, the search for the Temple of Artemis was a monumental puzzle. For centuries, the great temple's location was a complete mystery, buried under 20 feet of silt from the Cayster River. Then, in the 1860s, a determined British engineer named John Turtle Wood, driven by little more than a hunch and ancient texts, began a grueling 6-year dig. Battling malaria and financial ruin, he finally struck marble, uncovering the massive foundation that confirmed the temple's staggering size. Later excavations brought up more than just stone. They recovered delicate ivory statues and countless small silver models of the temple itself, ancient souvenirs sold to pilgrims. These tiny replicas, held in the palm of a hand, became crucial clues, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct the wonder's famous column design with astonishing accuracy. A similar story of stubborn pursuit unfolded at Halicarnassus, modern-day Bodrum. After the Knights of St. John used the mausoleum as a quarry, its exact site was forgotten. In the 1850s, another British archaeologist, Charles Newton, methodically surveyed the area. His team's excavations unearthed the vast platform and miraculously found sculptural treasures the knights had missed buried in the rubble. The discovery of the colossal statues of Mausolus and Artemisia, along with the breathtaking Amazon frieze, was a revelation. It transformed the mausoleum from a vague description in a Roman travel guide into a tangible artistic masterpiece, its fierce, beautiful faces now gazing out from museum cases in London. Perhaps the most dramatic modern rediscovery lies beneath the waves. For the Lighthouse of Alexandria, historians long relied on medieval descriptions and coins depicting its form. Then, in 1994, underwater archaeologists began scanning the murky harbor with sonar and diving into the silt. What they found was a submerged museum, a chaotic but magnificent graveyard of the pharaohs. They mapped enormous granite and marble blocks, some weighing 75 tons, and recovered statues that once adorned its base, including a Ptolemaic king portrayed as a sea god and a serene sphinx. These pieces, resting silently on the seafloor for centuries, confirmed the lighthouse's lavish decoration and helped experts finally piece together its likely three-tiered appearance with new confidence. The most elusive wonder, the Hanging Gardens, inspires a different kind of hunt, one fought in libraries and through cuneiform tablets. Without a known location, archaeologists like Stephanie Daly turned to textual forensics. By meticulously comparing ancient Assyrian engineering reports with later Greek Romantic accounts, she built a compelling case that shifted the wonder's location to Nineveh. Her work examines not soil, but the migration of stories over time, a reminder that a wonder can be lost not just to earthquakes, but to historical memory itself. Today, technology allows us to resurrect these giants in a new way. Digital artists and historians, using data from excavations, ancient descriptions, and architectural principles, create breathtaking three-dimensional models. We can now take a virtual walk through the forest of columns in Artemis Temple, or watch the sun glint off the bronze skin of the Colossus as it might have appeared from an approaching ship. These are not mere guesses, they are informed visual hypotheses, giving us the closest possible view of a lost skyline. This ongoing search in dirt, water, and text proves that the story of the Seven Wonders is not a closed book, but a living conversation between the past and our relentless desire to understand it. The stories of these wonders did not end with their physical collapse. They migrated from stone and bronze into the very fabric of our imagination, becoming powerful symbols in art, literature, and our collective dreams. For centuries after their disappearance, they were the ultimate reference point for the sublime. During the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered classical learning, artists who had never seen an intact wonder tried to envision them. Painters like Merton van Heemske created elaborate, fantastical engravings of all seven, blending biblical and classical imagery. His depiction of the Tower of Babel, for instance, borrowed heavily from descriptions of the Pharaoh's lighthouse, merging two great towers of legend into a single, impossible spire. These artworks were not accurate reconstructions. They were acts of creative archaeology, using fragments of text to build new visual myths that fed the era's hunger for ancient grandeur. This cultural echo resonated through literature's greatest halls. William Shakespeare, that master of human drama, used the wonders as shorthand for incomparable beauty and tragic impermanence. In his play, The Merchant of Venice, the character Portia is described as a wonder, a dazzling mortal who outshines the monuments of antiquity. Shakespeare writes, "We are the Jasons, we have won the fleece." He is directly invoking the myth of the Golden Fleece, a legendary artifact often compared to the wonders. Later authors, from poets like Percy Bysshe Shelley, whose sonnet Ozymandias is a perfect elegy for all fallen colossi, to novelists like Agatha Christie, who set a Hercule Poirot mystery amid Egyptian pyramids, kept the wonders alive as settings and metaphors. They represent peak human aspiration and its inevitable decay, themes that never grow old. Our modern storytelling engines, cinema, and video games have enthusiastically adopted this ancient vocabulary. Films like The Mummy use the Great Pyramid not just as a backdrop but as a character, a labyrinth of booby-trapped mystery. Video game franchises such as Civilization or Age of Empires have entire game mechanics where players must construct these wonders to secure cultural victories or technological bonuses. To build the Colossus in a digital world is to tap directly into that ancient desire for a legacy that alters the game's very rules. These are not casual references, they are a testament to how deeply the concept is embedded in our understanding of achievement and power. This obsession with listing and ranking supreme human creations is itself a legacy of those Greek travel poets. The original list was a kind of ancient viral article, and we have never stopped making new ones. The new Seven Wonders of the World campaign in the early 2000s was a global phenomenon. 1 billion votes cast to crown modern marvels like the Great Wall of China and Christ the Redeemer. While controversial, it proved the idea's enduring grip. More officially, UNESCO World Heritage List is the spiritual successor, a global effort to catalogue and protect places of outstanding universal value, from natural wonders to cultural masterpieces. When we designate a site like the Taj Mahal or the Statue of Liberty as a World Heritage Treasure, we are performing the same act of recognition as Antipater of Sidon did 2 millennia ago. We are saying this is something that transcends its time and place. This belongs to all of humanity. The journey of the Seven Wonders from physical reality to cultural memory reveals a profound truth. We are a species that builds not just for function but for meaning. We erect towers to reach the divine, carve tombs to cheat death, and cast statues to embody our ideals. And when those creations inevitably fall, we do not let them go. We paint them, write about them, debate them, and rebuild them in virtual worlds. They become more than history, they become part of our story, a permanent gallery in the museum of the human spirit. Their physical absence is what makes them so powerfully present, reminding us that our greatest wonder may be our endless need to wonder itself. But the story of ancient wonders is far bigger than any single list. Antipater of Sidon's poem was not the final word, it was just one very popular version. The canon of seven was surprisingly fluid in antiquity, with different travelers and scholars proposing their own favorites. This means there exists a fascinating shadow list, a collection of almost wonders, monuments that dazzled the ancient world and very nearly earned a spot among the immortal seven. Imagine the grandeur of the walls of Babylon. Ancient writers described them as one of the most spectacular sights in the world, a double ring of fortifications so wide that two chariots could pass each other on top. They were faced in glazed blue brick and decorated with rows of bulls and dragons shimmering in the desert sun. For a Greek visitor, these walls represented the pinnacle of Near Eastern military architecture and urban power, a strong contender for any list of marvels. Then there was the Palace of Cyrus at Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the vast Persian Empire. Its audience hall, the Apadana, was supported by 72 towering columns, each carved with intricate reliefs of subject nations bringing tribute. The scale was meant to humble, to visually demonstrate the king's dominion over all peoples. For a Greek, this was the ultimate symbol of imperial might, an awe-inspiring, if politically rival, achievement. Closer to home, the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus was a wonder of a different kind. It was not about raw power, but about healing and hope. The centerpiece was a magnificent chryselephantine statue of the god of medicine, Asclepius, seated and holding a staff entwined with a serpent, an image that endures as a medical symbol today. The sanctuary itself was a sprawling complex of temples, baths, and a hostel for the sick, built around a sacred spring. Its most famous feature, the Theatre of Epidaurus, was renowned for its perfect acoustics, where a whisper from the stage could be heard in the very back row. This was a wonder of community, science, and art, a place where human suffering met divine intervention. So why did these marvels fall just short? The reasons are as varied as the sites themselves. Sometimes it was geography. The list had a strong bias toward the Eastern Mediterranean, leaving out magnificent structures in Rome or farther afield. Sometimes it was politics. Celebrating a rival empire's palace might have been distasteful for a Greek poet. And sometimes it was simply the subjective taste of the writer, a personal preference for one type of grandeur over another. The existence of these almost wonders enriches our understanding immensely. It tells us that the ancient world was bursting with ambition, that the drive to build the impossible was not confined to 7 locations. The fluid list is a reminder that history is not a fixed set of facts but a conversation. It invites us to look beyond the canonical 7 and see a whole landscape of lost marvels, each with its own story of devotion, power, and genius. What other breathtaking creations have vanished, leaving only a faint echo in a fragment of text? These shadow lists reveal a world far more crowded with marvels than any single poem could capture. Yet even the wonders that made the final cut were often transformed by the very words that preserved them. The romantic, dreamy image we hold today of solitary giants in empty landscapes often clashes with the bustling, practical reality archaeology uncovers. Take the Great Pyramid, that icon of lonely desert majesty. Our mental postcard shows it in splendid isolation against endless sand dunes. The archaeological truth is far noisier and more human. It was not a solitary tomb in the wilderness, but the glittering centerpiece of a vast, planned necropolis, a city for the dead that required a city for the living to support it. At its feet sprawled a complex of temples, causeways, and smaller pyramids for queens. Nearby, excavations have revealed the barracks and bakeries of the workers' village, a bustling community that housed and fed the thousands of skilled laborers who built it. The pyramid was the climax of a sacred and industrial district, humming with priests, artisans, and administrators long after the pharaoh was sealed inside. It was embedded in the daily life and economy of the state, not a remote monument to silence. The lighthouse of Alexandria suffers a similar romantic revision. We envision it as a solitary tower of myth, a graceful white finger pointing to the heavens from a lonely rock. In reality, the Pharos was the ultimate piece of public infrastructure, the ancient equivalent of a major airport control tower. Its island was likely connected to the mainland by a causeway, the Heptastadion, which also formed part of the city's dual harbors. The base of the lighthouse itself was not a silent plinth, but a multi-story administrative building with rooms for officials, storage for fuel, and a ramp echoing with the sounds of donkey carts. Its light was a municipal service funded by port taxes and maintained by a rotating crew, as vital to Alexandria's survival as its freshwater canals. It was a working machine, its beauty married irrevocably to its function, guiding grain ships that fed the empire and welcoming scholars to its legendary library. This gap between dream and reality is woven from the nature of our sources. Ancient writers were not producing archaeological reports, they were crafting narratives to impress, inspire, or moralize. A poet like Antipater wanted to evoke awe, not document the smell of donkey dung on the lighthouse ramp. He focused on the sublime scale, the shimmering materials, the emotional impact. Later artists, from Renaissance painters to Hollywood set designers, have compounded this by filling in the blanks with their own era's ideals of beauty and mystery. They removed the clutter of everyday life to isolate the iconic form, creating a purified, mythologized version of history that is often more powerful and enduring than the complicated truth. And yet, this mythologized version is not a lie, it is a different kind of truth. The dreamy image of the hanging gardens, whether it existed or not, speaks to a universal longing for an earthly paradise. The solitary colossus straddling a harbor in our minds embodies the human desire to conquer scale and leave a mark that alters the very landscape. These romanticized visions are cultural memories, collective dreams that have shaped art, literature, and our very imagination for 2,000 years. They prove that a wonder's power is not confined to its physical stones. It lives equally in its ability to inspire stories, to become a symbol. The archaeological reality grounds us in the ingenious, gritty humanity of these achievements, while the romantic dream allows them to soar in our collective consciousness. One shows us how they were built, the other reveals why we still care. This enduring conversation between dream and stone reached a global crescendo in 2007. A Swiss foundation launched the new 7 Wonders of the World campaign, a massive, modern-day version of those ancient Greek travel poems, but decided by millions of online votes. It was democracy applied to wonder-making. The winners reflected our contemporary world, from the ancient but enduring Great Wall of China to the modernist curves of Christ the Redeemer in Rio, to the sacred Islamic site of the Taj Mahal, to the crumbling Incan retreat of Machu Picchu. Even the sole surviving ancient wonder, the Great Pyramid, was included as an honorary candidate, a bridge across 46 centuries of awe. This new list sparked excitement and controversy in equal measure. Critics argued it was a popularity contest lacking scholarly rigor. Supporters saw it as a powerful act of global cultural recognition, letting people everywhere have a say in what deserves to be celebrated. But beneath the debate lies a fascinating question: what truly defines a wonder in our modern age? The ancient criteria were clear: colossal scale, breathtaking beauty, and a touch of the divine or royal. Today, our values have expanded. We still revere immense engineering, like the colossal railway tunnels under the Alps or the International Space Station orbiting silently above. Yet we also cherish cultural resilience, like a temple complex that survived a brutal regime, or a bridge that became a symbol of reconciliation. A wonder today might be as much about the story it tells as the material it is made from. Is the internet a wonder? Is a vaccine that eradicates a disease? Our definition has stretched to include intangible achievements of collective human knowledge. So look at that modern list again. The Great Wall is sheer, daunting scale. Christ the Redeemer is art and faith meeting atop a mountain. Petra is the beauty of human ingenuity carved directly into nature. Each winner represents a different facet of what we now hold in wonder. This brings the journey full circle back to you. If you were to compose your own list, your own personal poem of marvels, what would you include? Would you choose the deepest ocean trench, a silent, pressurized world we have barely seen? Or perhaps a library containing every book ever written, a monument not of stone but of ideas? The act of choosing itself is the legacy of Antipater of Sidon. It means you are participating in that oldest of human traditions, looking at the world, feeling that catch in your breath, and declaring, this is a wonder. Our journey through these 7 visions in stone and story is a map of human ambition itself. We began with the pyramid, a mountain of certainty aimed at eternity, and ended with the lighthouse, a tower of reason guiding ships through the dark. In between, we wandered through gardens that might have been dreams, stood before gods carved in gold and ivory, and marveled at tombs built as propaganda and chariots cast from the weapons of defeated enemies. Each wonder, whether still standing or lost to time, was a collision of 3 powerful forces: the raw drive for political power, the deep well of religious devotion, and the soaring flight of artistic and engineering genius. They were never just buildings, they were arguments, declarations of what a society believed it could achieve when it poured its collective soul into a single, staggering project. They have become our universal benchmarks, the yardstick against which we measure human potential. For over 2,000 years, their very names have evoked a scale of achievement that feels almost mythical. When we call something a modern wonder, we are invoking their ghost, asking our own creations to stand in that same legendary light. Yet, simultaneously, they are profound memento mori, reminders of time's relentless passage. Their ruins, their absences, whisper that even the greatest works of our hands are temporary. The Colossus lay broken for centuries, a tourist attraction to transience. The Temple of Artemis was baked into mortar for a fortress. This duality is their true lesson. They show us the breathtaking height of our reach and the humbling fact of our limits. So where does this leave us, here in the present, surrounded by our own steel and glass towers? It leaves us with a question far more interesting than any list. The real wonder is not the stone that was carved, but the dream that inspired the carving. It is the spark that made a king believe he could build a stairway to the stars, that made a sculptor believe he could make a god sit down in a temple, that made engineers believe they could hold a flame steady against the wind and sea for generations. That dream of building something eternal, of leaving a mark that outlasts a single lifetime, is the thread that connects Khufu's architects to the designers of space telescopes and digital libraries. It is the wonder that never crumbles. The stones of the ancient world may fade, but our conversation with them does not have to end. Tell me, which of these 7 visions captures your imagination the most? Is it the silent, geometric mystery of the Great Pyramid, or the romantic, elusive phantom of the Hanging Gardens? Does the fallen giant of Rhodes haunt you, or the steady, guiding flame of Alexandria? Share your choice in the comments below and let us keep this ancient story alive. If you enjoyed this journey through dreamy history, subscribe for more explorations into the lost corners of our past, where every ruin has a story waiting to be told.